I'm going to kick things off with this J-15. I don't know how well the camera's going to show this, but there is a lot of fall off right here at that neck to body junction. Now, it's okay for the fingerboard to ramp down a little bit, and I actually purposely do that on my own guitars. A lot of builders and manufacturers do that on purpose to sort of ramp the fingerboard down, but this is pretty extreme. The problem the customer's been having is he can't get the action down any closer without all kinds of buzzing. So this is going to need that proverbial fret dress at the neck junction, and we'll walk you through it step by step as always. There is another issue. Now, I have covered this before in other videos, but I want to bring you in close again and show you. See that? Woo! That is not good. When the saddle is loose like that, and this is a walnut, this is not a rosewood bridge, this is a walnut bridge. When the saddle is loose like that, what happens is the string energy is actually pushing the saddle forward. And there's always a danger, especially in a narrow bridge like this, of just snapping the lip of the bridge right off. So we are going to make a new saddle, and it certainly isn't going to be wobbling like that when we're done. That's got the transducer underneath the saddle, so another reason to get a good tight fit. Well, we're going to start by heating this nut and getting it out, because we're putting a compensated nut in anyway, so I want to be able to go end to end uninterrupted, so this is coming out. Okay, so while that lacquer is warm, I'm just going to run that blade across there. This side as well, just that little, just the edge on both sides. So we're just cutting through the clear coat really, just so that when we pull it out we don't pull any lacquer with it. Let's see if that's going to cooperate. Well, that came out clean enough. Just going to chisel off that glue in the end of the fingerboard while it's still warm. It's interesting how things sort of have come full circle from the time of Orville, who started in Michigan back in the 1800s. And at that time in Michigan there were walnut trees 8 feet in diameter. And in many instances it was the wood of choice for Orville Gibson himself. Here we go, all that time later. So we've come full circle. Walnut fingerboard, walnut bridge, walnut back, walnut sides. Nothing wrong with it. Walnut's a good wood. Of course, Laravé, lots of other manufacturers have jumped on the walnut wagon. I know lots of people sort of double back the string like that, and I understand what they're doing, but I never bother. I mean, the hourglass shape or profile of the post, when you tighten the string, it naturally just tightens on itself. So I really don't do that because, you know, it just makes the task of getting the strings off a little more precarious. You may scratch the headstock or poke your finger with the smaller strings like a hypodermic syringe. So typically from the point of manufacture until a year or so later, these will loosen up because the lacquer shrinks. In many cases the wood will shrink a little bit as well as it's been exposed to heat and temperature shifts. Just don't over tighten. So easy to strip. Tighten them until that washer doesn't move and you're golden. Well, before we can check that intonation at the saddle and the bridge, we need to be able to drop the action down so that the guitar is playable. The action, the way it was, you'd need a vice grip for a left hand to play chords on this thing. So we're going to take care of that problem spot I pointed out earlier. So these are the files that you guys get in your kits. Oh, and by the way, congratulations to Robert Antill in Pennsylvania. Your kit is on the way. So we're taking care of this neck to body junction, and I will I've said it 100 times before and I'll say it again, that when you file, the file itself is dead flat. The frets obviously have a curvature on them. The only way to follow that curvature is to move obliquely as you file across the crown. We're going to check this with a straight edge in a second and see how close we are to getting rid of this high spot that is preventing us from being able to drop the action down where it should be. Let's take another look at that. Slide up to the bridge. Yeah, we can come down a little bit more. Of course, all 6 of these Gibsons will be getting a compensated nut. That's kind of a given. Check that again. Okay, that's much better. Now we'll re-crown all this nasty stuff here where the frets were leveled. Now, Robert, you were asking about fret files for crowning, and the only one I ever use is this one, which is the large Hosco file. And the reason for that is you can do a small fret with a larger file, but you can't do a large fret with a small file. So I got a mandolin with the little skinny one I've had for like 30 years in my toolbox. Never used it once. Even when I'm doing mandolins, I use a large file. And I've mentioned this before multiple times, is don't touch the center of the fret with the crowning file. All you're doing is taking those, you're taking that squareness out, and in the next stage we'll scrub those crowns back to dead center. So this, the only thing you're using that crowning file for is to get rid of that squareness, the sharpness on both sides of the fret after leveling. Well, I've got that fret guard on there. I want to just touch. It doesn't. They're not very proud. They're just a little tiny bit proud. But this is February is the month you do that in Canada. That's the driest month of the year. So once this is done, it'll never need to be done again. I'm not talking about the fret dress. I'm talking about the edge dress. If you get it in February, you're good. You're good for the long haul. And that's it. That wasn't too bad. I've just thought of something. Normally, if it's rosewood, the only thing I'd ever mask is the plastic inlays, or if there's a real fancy inlay in the fingerboard, I'd mask that off. But with this one, because the fingerboard is walnut that's been stained, you know, darker to kind of look like rosewood, well, it means I've got to mask off the whole fingerboard. Otherwise, when I go to scrub the crowns back to center, we'll sand off that. We would sand off that dark stain that they colored the walnut with. So unfortunately, it's just one of those things, a little bit more extra work. Now we can safely sand all of the tooling marks out without worrying about sanding off the stain. I'm starting with my 400 grit, just getting the worst of that stuff right around this area here where we leveled. I'm also kind of finishing up my edge dress with that 400 initially, just to kind of get, just to soften those edges. This is the scrub block that you'll find in your kit, Robert, and you basically wrap your sandpaper around that. It's been working like a charm for the last half century. So this is our 400. We're going to step it up to 600. 600. We have 3 pieces of 600. I got them stacked here on the block, so. And that has taken out all the traces of the leveling marks of the file. So this is the emery polishing paper, and this is the last step before we buff it out with the canvas wheel and the jeweler's rouge. Just go over that. I got a couple of pieces here. Go over that a couple of times. Piece of tape coming up there. Like I said, normally on rosewood you wouldn't have to go to this much trouble, but because it's not rosewood, it's walnut stained to look like rosewood, you don't want to take any stain off. So we're ready to buff now, so we're just going to load up that canvas wheel. This compound, you just get it in bar form, jeweler's rouge. And we'll buff it out. Man, that's cold. That's pulling air in from outside. So here's our final touch. We're just kind of rubbing off the compound, and then we're done. At least with the frets we're done. Still a bit of work yet. Beautiful. That did it. So we are now with the bridge. Oh, that's great. That drastically improved the neck to body angle. So now we'll get this action wherever we want it. So now, instead of this, we've got this. But I'm not wasting any time with that saddle because I can see they've chased this to the leading edge. 5 of 6 strings are as far forward as they can go, which means they ran out of real estate. I'm going to go right to a cantilevered saddle right away. I'm not messing around with this one. Okay, for Will and Patrick and Bill Stewart, I've opened up that chuck. I've loosened off the table. I'm raising that until the hex drive goes into the chuck, right? And then, before I tighten that, I'm tightening up the table because it drops a little bit when you loosen it off. Okay, so it's still, I haven't tightened the platform yet. So now I'll tighten up the actual chuck until it grabs that hex drive. You got the three jaws on the chuck will make a positive lock. Okay, so that's basically grabbed. Now, and only now, I snug this down. And it doesn't need a lot of torque, just a little bit. And that's it, we're ready to go. Now I clamp the actual platform to the table so it doesn't shift when we kick the sander on. I mean, these 6 compensated nuts for these next 6 Gibsons have paid for this 3 times over. Yeah. Look at the length on that one, a little bit longer than we need. Okay, so that is the saddle that you saw me press fit, and that's 134. So I need to take the leg of this down to 134. So I'm going to start with the edge sander here. Yeah, 157. So I'm using this new radius disc sander to get me down to the final thickness. Okay, we're after 134. And we got 137 on that side, so light touch here. And this is why you want that momentary switch. Let's try that again. I am down to 135. Okay, the rest is going to be done by hand. Before we get that final press fit, I'm going to just cut this to length. So this is where we're finishing off for length, and I go back to the stationary vertical disc. Okay, 2 things I'm doing here. One is I'm getting my overall length. I'm going to turn on the dust collector so I'm going to have to kind of shout over the dust collector. Give me a second here. So first of all, I'm cutting it to length. Then I'm flipping it over, and I want to round out that end so it fits in the slot like you do with a regular saddle. Back to the guitar. Okay, we can see that this obviously needs to come down. So I'm going to take that out and mark it back to the stationary disc with a momentary foot switch and work that down and check it again. Okay, let's bring that down. Dust collector again. Now I am eyeing that to make sure that we get a nice crisp 90 degrees, which we have. Okay, back to the guitar. Okay, this is the press fit we're after. So no wiggling, no jiggling, but you want to make sure that that ledge doesn't actually touch. You got to remember there's a pickup, and the pressure of the string needs to push that into the pickup. If this ledge gets hung up even slightly on the wood of the bridge, you're going to have a problem with that pickup. But I can tell you that other saddle that was in there's no way that pickup worked. It would have been a disaster. So now we're going to radius the crown to match the fingerboard and bring the action down so that the guitar is finally playable. I have crowned the saddle to match the fingerboard radius. I have the values that were on the original saddle, which was wobbling and tipping in there. So the fact that they have cut them right to the extremity, the leading edge, 5 out of 6 strings. I'm going to err on the side of caution and give it a little bit more. So I've marked the string path, all 6 strings, and I'm bringing the G forward of the original saddle slot, the D just a little bit back, the A a little bit further, and then the low E back again. So you can see I'm ramping back gradually from this G to the low E. The B was at the back of the saddle, so I'm more or less leaving it there. And then the high E was right at the leading edge as well, so I'm kind of giving that a little bit extra too. So that's where I'm going to start, and then we'll put the strings on and sort of get a read on this and see how close we are. Okay, I have just brought that back to the line on the edge of the radius disc sander we put in the drill press, and I'm pretty happy with that. This B needs to come to that back edge, so I'm going to do that by hand. Then we'll do our intonation check. Here's the first run at this cantilevered compensated bridge saddle. Just so you know, I've just put the original nut back in for now. We're just searching for the values at the focal point on the bridge for the 7th fret note and its corresponding octave. So have a look at the tuner as I go through my check. We're going to tune that fretted note B, 7th fret, and we're going to play the octave. Okay, that's way sharp. So there's lots of room to go back on that one. A, again, we're fretting the note E on the 7th fret. A little bit more. And the octave. Well, that's sharp, but it's not crazy sharp. Here's our D string, note A, and its octave. Well, that's pretty well right on the money. Let's leave that one for now. 3rd string, 7th fret. That's pretty darn close too. 2nd string, got the note G, which is 8th fret, and then 20th fret. Looks pretty good actually. Let's try the F sharp, 7th fret. B string, 7th fret, and octave. You know, it's a little bit sharp, but this action is still a little bit high, so it may just be a matter of lowering the action a little bit. Let's go to the 1st string. 1st string, 7th fret, and octave. Little tiny bit sharp. Okay, so this is my first round through. I've marked all those values string to string. This is 7th fret, corresponding octave. Now we're going to loosen the strings off and have a real close look at that saddle. First thing I'm going to do is run that pencil across there and get kind of a topographic read of the highest point of contact on the saddle all the way across. Okay, so these are the values. Now you got to remember that the actual height of the saddle, and you want to remember this when you're doing this job, for all you guys that have your compensated nut kits, err on the side of caution, and you always make it a little bit higher than it's gonna be, and this gives you some material to play with as you're honing in on the final values. So the 6th string is 12 cents sharp. Now it's also quite high, so it needs to come down, and that will reduce the sharpness. So I'm going to pull it back. We made our topographic map all the way across, so we know that that line indicates the highest point of contact on the saddle all the way across. So as we move this 6th string back, it's also going to drop down, which will reduce the sharpness. So I don't want to get too rambunctious there. I'm just going to move it back a little bit. The A string is only 4 cents sharp, so it also needs to move back. And as I move back, because this is sort of ramped down here, it will also drop a little bit, which will also reduce this sharpness. Now the D string is a completely different story. It's flat, and we're way beyond the confines of the original routed slot. So we've got to come forward on this D. Not very much, just a little bit. The G is 4 cents flat, and that's where it's contacting. So it's got a pretty, I want to bring that right to the leading edge for the sort of 2nd round, and then we'll see where we end up. The B is 3 cents sharp, so it's got to come back, and once again, because this is ramped down, just dropping the string is going to lower the sharpness, but we're also going to move the focal point back. Lastly, the first string is 3 cents flat, and we got enough to kind of squeeze that in. We're going to move that forward. So I'm going to shape this by hand. No more machine work now. I'm going to shape this by hand and then come back, and we're going to check those values again. Okay, this is round 2. There's our low E and octave. There's the A and octave. The D and octave. G, octave. Quite a bit sharp. I've got that marked 4 sharp. It's our second string. 2 cents sharp. And our first string and octave. So these are the new values. The 6th, the 5th, and the 4th string are perfect. They're bang on the money. The G is 4 cents sharp. The B is still 2 cents sharp, and the high E is 8 cents sharp. So I'm going to work that saddle again, and we'll come back. Okay, I'm going to mark that again. And that's where we are now. These 3 are the ones that need to be adjusted. All right, this is our 3rd time through, and I'm going to do this right on the saddle, 1 string at a time. They all need to be scraped back, or the string needs to be lengthened slightly. We'll start with the A string, and it needs to come back 3. So just a triple check, I'm going to run my pencil along there, and I'm just scraping it with a razor blade. Just that little tiny bit. Let's see what that gives us. So all the rest of the strings are actually tuned to concert pitch. I'm just going to tune that one back up. 7th fret and octave. Okay, next. And again, I kind of triple check just to make sure that we know where the highest point is. And that's where it is. And that's got to come back 5. So you got to remember that as we're moving it back, the string is dropping a little bit too. So got that blade kind of tilted. Let's see what we got here. Let's try that. There's our 7th fret. And octave. Next string was 3 cents sharp. Same thing. We're going to just loosen that off. We've got to come back 3 cents. Not very much. Try scraping that. That'll probably do it. Let's check it. Okay, 7th fret and octave. Okay, can't complain with that. Okay, 2nd string, 2 cents. Boy, that isn't very much at all. So 2 cents. Just a triple check. Make sure we're the highest point here. Okay. Boy, 2 cents is not very much. Let's try that. 7th fret and there we go. Last string. You know, I am actually going to step up that 11th thou to 12th thou. It's just, to my ear, it's just sounding too skinny. So I'm going to wind a 12th thou string to replace that 11th thou that's on there that comes with the set. Before we throw the 12 on there, that was 4 cents sharp, so I would think the 12 would be at least that sharp. So I'm going to mark that again just to be sure. And we'll move that back 4 cents. Let's try that. Okay, first string, 7th fret. And okay, the bridge is done. Now we can sort of abandon the bridge because now we need to start on the compensated nut. Just got to reduce the thickness of that leg so it drops right in. So to get a nice press fit, we're going to go back to the disc sander, the drill press disc sander, and just skim that down a little bit. A little bit more. Now we've got to bring the height of the leg down, and we have to put that radius on the ledge itself. Just skim that down. Here, radius that crown. All right, this is the final call. This thing is 100%. That is our saddle. That's what we ended up with. I'm just going to scuff it out with some 600 grit and make it look a little prettier. Now at the other end, that is what we ended up with for the compensated nut. So these are 11 to 52 strings, although I stepped up the first string to 12th thou from 11th thou. And this thing is perfect. So over to the tuner. So if I want to get really fussy, which I probably will, I can skim back that leading edge all the way across, sort of clean this up. I'll probably do that. I'm going to do it on the edge of the new sander. It makes a pretty quick job of that. Before I even do that, I'll bring you in and show you the tuner, and we'll go through the whole gamut, string to string, fret to fret, open string, 1st fret, 12th fret, 7th fret, and 19th fret. There's our E and 12th fret, 7th fret, and octave. 12th fret and open. 1st fret. It's our A string, 12th fret, 7th fret, and octave. 12th fret fretted and open and 1st fret. Open, 12th fret, 7th fret, octave, 12th fret fretted, open, and 1st fret. There's our 3rd string, 12th fret, 7th fret, 12th fret fretted, open, and 1st fret. And then 1st fret. 1st string. And then 1st fret note. Okay, now as always, the real test is just play some chords. Let's do that. You know, I have to say that I'm very impressed with this guitar. I mean, the top has got a beautiful, very slight spherical radius on it. Of course, it's got the compensated nut now, and it tunes beautifully. And these are the 11 to 52, so like a custom light. I think Martin now make the same gauge of string, 11 to 52, just a little bit, a shade lighter, 1 thou all the way across, lighter than regular lights. The bridge saddle has been cantilevered and intonated. And for any of you Patreon guys that are actually doing this type of work, you really got to make sure that that cantilevered section is not hung up on the edge of the slot, otherwise your pickup won't work. Now, to get that to seat perfectly, and it is perfect, we've got walnut back and sides, maple neck. It's a quarter sawn grain, so you don't have to worry about this neck ever breaking. That'll never be an issue. Walnut fingerboard, walnut bridge. And like I mentioned earlier, this type of bridge is, you know, it's not overly large, not a very big footprint. And I'm sure there are fasteners under there. There's no way that little strip of wood is going to withstand that string tension. You need the helpers in there. Now, I am going to get in with my iPhone and have a look at the bracing. But the general consensus, as far as I'm concerned, this is a very nice guitar. I mean, it was impossible to play when the guy brought it in. It just sat for months and months and months since he bought it. But now that it's been ultra tweaked, whew, it is very nice. So, I've got something here I'm playing that's, this is kind of a 6/8 thing, and you've heard me do this before where I've layered chords. I'm arpeggiating the chords sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, we're going to start here. Okay, this is the second layer. Well, this is the wrap-up on this J-15 with the walnut sides, walnut back, walnut bridge, walnut fingerboard, and maple neck. And that is our compensated cantilevered saddle. I've gone inside and I've snapped a bunch of photographs of the bracing, and you know, I gotta say, the Montana Gibson guys have totally got it together. This is a beautiful guitar. Now on the other bench, we have this vintage J-45, and I've been in there, and I've been inside this one too with the camera and taken a bunch of pictures, which I will post, of the bracing. Very meticulous work. I'm taking advantage of the fact that I've got both these guitars here at the same time with exactly the same scale length. So that's going to give me a jump start on that compensated saddle. We'll get started right now. Well, we've got a bunch of work to do on this one, but we are going to be doing a fret dress end to end, taking care of that neck to body junction. It's not as drastic on this one as it was on that J-16, but it needs to be done all the same. So first thing we're going to do is heat up and remove this nut. That's our full 4 minutes. Let's heat up that razor knife. Doesn't come out much cleaner than that. And of course this fingerboard actually is rosewood. You can see how clean that came out. No lumber there, man. That's like right on the glue line. You can see where I scored that black lacquer, much like a Les Paul, although this one isn't sunken in as much as a Les Paul. So now we've got complete access for our fret dress. So we got that nut out nice and clean, but before we go dressing anything, I wanted to bring in, because although to the eye this looks straight, well, you can't always trust your eye. This truss rod is loaded for string load. So we got to back it off a little bit until this disappears. And I'm sure it'll just be a half turn. Just back it off just a little bit. Let's check that again. That did it. About a third of a turn. So now we got the lay of the neck where it should be. and we're going to go end to end. That was one of the reasons that we took the nut out. The main reason, of course, is we're putting a compensated nut. So now we're ready to dress. We'll get rid of this fret wear in the first 5-6 frets, and then we'll take care of any of this neck to body junction stuff. So next step is to go full length with the fret dress. Very delicate touch here. I can feel it grabbing. Yeah, there are a couple of high spots, but you don't want to get too rambunctious with the file. I'm starting at the top end. Yeah, most of the discrepancy is on the bass side. There's almost nothing on the treble side. So I'm kind of cross-hatching as I go. You see me move obliquely across the fret like that because you need to chase across the radius of the crown. I'll bring you in for a closer look when we're closer to the mark. So I backed up from the top end of the fingerboard towards the first position, and I'm going to go over this. I'll triple check this with a straight edge in a second, and I'm liking that. There's lots of room left on that truss rod for adjustment, so that's not going to be an issue. Okay, we'll check this all the way along. We're doing 3 frets at a time, which lets you know if there's a high spot. Nothing so far. Go to the next straight edge down. I think that's pretty well got it. I'll bring you in for a closer look before I re-crown. Looks good. Like I said, there wasn't much discrepancy at the neck junction. There was a little bit on this one. Just go to a slightly smaller straight edge again. As long as you're bridging 3 frets, if there's a high spot, it'll show up. And now we have the smallest straight edge. Again, as long as you're bridging 3 frets, they can find any high spots if they're there, and there are none. Now that we've leveled this. Done deal. Let me bring you in before I re-crown. I just want to show you what we've got here. So I'm showing you this now so that you can see the tooling marks of the file. And when we're done, we'll make all of that stuff disappear and buff this to its final mirror shine. Well, because we've got two guitars exactly the same scale length, exactly the same gauge of string, and exactly the same tuning, concert pitch, so I took the measurements off Ryan's J-16 saddle and then transferred them to this saddle. This doesn't happen very often, but because both guitars are almost identical as far as scale length, tuning, string gauge, and fingerboard radius, I've kind of fast-tracked this saddle. I still have to do all the ultra tweaking. It's helped me get a bit of a jump start on this one. So we're doing a LR Baggs Anthem SL installation on this one. So now that the frets have been dressed, leveled, crown polished, and our cantilevered compensated bridge saddle has been done, before we go any further, to determine the actual final height, well, we need to put that pickup in first. And that is what we're about to do. So this is the system we're installing. This is their microphone that actually sticks to the bridge plate on the underside of the bridge. There's our little volume control that sticks to the edge of the sound hole. And this goes through the tail block and then tightens down from the outside. Now, although this is sort of designed to use as a strap button, we're going to put a separate strap button below it because these things, anyone who's got one of these things knows they're guaranteed to loosen up. I don't recommend that you use this for your strap. Just use it for your input jack. So I'll wind this back so we got enough length to go through the depth of the tail block. We'll do that first. So this slips off. There's your battery connector. So this little battery bag will Velcro to the edge of the head block. And we'll walk you through that as well. First thing is to get this guy in place. So let's do that. So what we have here is a 1/4-inch dowel that just happens to fit right in there like a 1/4-inch jack. And we're going to gently drop that stuff into the sound hole, feed our dowel through that hole that's already there in the tail block, and then just index that on to the input jack. So I just gently pull that through. Hopefully we got enough thread to get us through. We might need to open that up a little bit. That's a little tiny bit tight. 15-30 seconds is the right size for that. So you can see that bit goes right in there. So 15-30 seconds is a magic number, and it's already been bored out, but I'm just gonna just ease it open that little tiny bit. Alright, let's try that again. See if that does it for us. So I'm just slipping that 1/4-inch dowel into the input jack and pulling that through. Ah, that's better. Okay, so let me bring you in close here. So I've actually left that a little too long, so I've got to push this through and thread that bolt in this direction to pull this back so that this ledge is actually shy of the edge of the hole. So let's do that. Let's do that. So I'm just reaching in and just give that 3 or 4 turns and we'll check it again. Okay, let's give it another look. You know something? It's still a little proud, so we're gonna give it another couple of turns. One more time. There we go. Let's try that. Okay, I'm liking that. Next thing is this flat washer goes on, and it basically rests against the ledge of that 15-32 inch hole. So we follow that up with our nut and thread that into place. You can snug that down. So the reason you've got that through board hole is it allows you to, I just stick an Allen key in there, and that allows you to kind of stop that from rotating as you snug down that nut. So there's our little trim washer, and that basically finishes it up. Now, as a final touch, I actually stuff a little piece of leather there in the jaws of the vice grips and just adjust that. You don't want to mar anything. And it's kind of like, and then I tighten it up, and that ends up being much tighter than what anyone could ever do with their fingers, and we don't leave any marks. Okay, so the next thing I'm doing, I'm installing this microphone that adheres to the underside of the bridge plate. So as you're reaching in there, I put those two center pins in. When I gently touch this outside diameter, I can find dead center between these two pins. Put a piece of masking tape over that just to hold them in place. Now this is a pretty good press fit, so it's not going to fall out. Okay, I am doing a quick dry run on this first and just kind of holding it up against those pins, find out where I am. Make sure we get that centered. That is centered. Okay, so I think we're good to go. Now that we know where we're sticking this thing, it's time to put it in the right place. Okay, so I've got those pins again. I can feel with my finger. I've indexed in between those pins, and now I'm moving it away towards the saddle, so it's kind of underneath the saddle, and pushing it into place. And that is going to do it. So I'm basically underneath the saddle with that pickup. Right, now that that microphone is installed, we're ready to install the under the saddle transducer. So let's do that. And like a lot of companies, I don't know if they've actually got that pre-drilled. They probably do because it's so common now. Yes, they do. They have it actually pre-drilled on both ends. Sort of keep your eye on those wires as you're going so that you don't get them all kind of tangled. Okay, so far so good. We're going to move this guy out of the way. That's our little volume control. And that is our battery. So, okay, that looks good. So, nothing's obstructed here. Okay, next step, and I check these wires as you go to make sure they're not all twisted together. So that looks like they're all nice and freed up. I'll tilt the guitar towards me like this. And usually, if you find the sixth, I'm doing this for illustration, but there's the 6-string hole. Well, we've got to come just over from that. So just, sometimes if I need to, I'll stick a little Allen key in there just to kind of find my way. Okay, that's where we want to go. So we'll feed that up through, like so. And then we'll pull this back through and temporarily press fit our saddle into place. It'll settle over the course of a few hours. So now that that's kind of held in place, we've got the microphone in place. Now we'll continue with the installation of the volume control and the battery bag. You will find a bunch of these fold over, peel and stick wire retainer tabs in your little battery bag. These two wires, your control, which ends up sticking to the underside of the sound hole here, and your battery bag, they can share the same tab. So what I'm doing is I'm folding this over like so, and then I'm going to slide it along and see how much slack we've got. See how far we can reach with this. And that still leaves us enough slack to be able to put this in the proper location. So I'm going to peel that off and stick it into place. Again, it'll end up sticking in right about there. So everything's in place without any strain on any of the wires, on the pickup wires, on the volume control wires, or the battery bag wires. So next, I'm going to put another one of these tabs onto the battery terminal wire, and I'm going to stick that right about here. So that's how much slack that we've got, and you don't want this flopping around inside the guitar. So that's just enough to kind of get access to the battery and then adhere the battery to the corresponding Velcro inside. Next, I prefer to cut back about a ½ inch off of this Velcro. So this has got a 3M adhesive there as well. I stick this not to the face of the head block, but to the top of the head block. And the reason I do that is then when you put your battery bag in there, you got gravity working in your favor, so that the battery bag and the weight of the battery sits on the edge of the head block instead of the face of the head block. A couple of reasons I do that. One is, on the face of the head block, of course, you got the serial number. And secondly, like I said, the weight of the battery now just rests on the edge of the head block, which is, you know, a huge block of mahogany. Let's get our battery bag and battery and install that. This is our little volume control, and this is the little 3M tab. You always want to check, because it'll change from guitar to guitar. You want to make sure you got enough room for this thing, and that you're not sitting up on a brace. There's just enough space right there. Keep it fairly discreet here, so we just have it so that it just barely shows, and just kind of hold it in place there for a couple of seconds. Now there is a strap that goes from the X brace to the head brace, so you got to make sure that you're not kind of sitting on that. So lastly, we got our Energizer battery. Now we can put the battery in. It just slips into this battery bag, like so. Closes with Velcro, and it sticks onto the edge of the head block. And that's it, the whole system is installed. That's where the pin for the actual strap button goes. So we scrape a little bit of paraffin wax on those threads, and so the idea here is your strap goes on here, and then your cord comes up and over, and then you plug in, so that the strap button acts as a strain relief. In the event that you step on the cord, which often happens, the actual input jack never gets the hit. So that's the reasoning behind that. Put the original nut back in temporarily to get a read on the height of the action at the bridge. Now it is quite a bit high, and that's good. I want to err on the side of caution. We got lots of material to work with here. This needs to come down, but the crown of the bridge is already radiused and kind of pseudo-intonated, because it's exactly the same scale as I mentioned earlier as the other guitar, same scale length, same string gauge, same tuning. Then I've kind of roughed it in, and I think I got it pretty close. Let me just give you another look at that other saddle. So that's the saddle on the J-15, and I've used that as a template for this saddle on this guitar. If I'm taking anything off, and I do need to take something off, I need to lower it, well, it's got to come off the underside. So you can see there's quite a bit of space under here, and that's going to allow us to lower the action considerably. But what we have to be cautious of, this cantilevered portion of the bridge that extends beyond the confines of the original slot, you got to be careful that that doesn't get hung up on the rosewood, otherwise your pickup won't work. So for now I'm just putting the 6th and 1st strings on just to get a read on the height. Once I'm kind of liking the height of the 1st and 6th string, then we'll put the rest of the strings on and we'll check the intonation. Okay, I did reduce that, and I can see right now that that center portion of the cantilever is hung up on the rosewood, so I'm going to just kiss that on that radius disc sander that we have in the drill press. Okay, I am just going to kiss this. A little bit more. Back to the guitar. So I've got the action pretty darn close to the finished height. It's still a little proud, but I want to have a little bit of real estate to play with to kind of micro tweak the intonation here at the saddle. Now, to make sure that we've got that saddle dead flat on the bottom, I've plugged the guitar in and dialed over to the bridge transducer only, and just I can hear both outside strings. Now that that's been determined, we'll put the middle four strings on and start the whole regulation and compensation process for the bridge saddle. Okay, here we go. Let's see how close we are. We're going to check our 7th fret and corresponding 19th. So here we go, moment of truth. First round draft, just like in hockey. 7th fret and octave. It's about 6 cents sharp. We've got lots to play with there. So here's our A string, 7th fret and octave. Yeah, it's about 7-8 cents sharp. Here's our 4th string, D string, 7th fret, and octave. Ooh, that's pretty close, 2 cents right out of the gate. It was worth taking the time to copy that other saddle. Here's our 3rd string, 7th fret, and octave. Whew, doesn't get much closer than that. There's our B. Yeah, it's a good 6 cents sharp. 1st string. Again. Whew, 2 cents sharp. So that's not going to take much. So we're going to mark all the way across. So that's where we ended up first time through. I'll bring you back for round 2. We'll start with the low E. We're going to come back 6 cents. So I'm going to... You got to remember that as we're pulling back, we're actually dropping down. The action is lowering. So that means that that'll actually help that sharpness. That'll help alleviate that sharpness as well, just dropping the string down. The A string was 7, had to come back 7, same deal. I'm kind of angling it back. The string is dropping down as we bring it back. The D was just 2 cents. I'm just going to barely touch that one. The G was perfect, so I'm going to leave that one alone. Basically chase it right to the leading edge. The B was 6 cents sharp, so again we're dropping it down and we're moving it back to get our 6 cents. The high E was 2 cents sharp, so we're bringing that back just a touch as well. And okay, back to the guitar. Here we go, in for round 2. 7th fret on the 6th string, and octave. 5th string, and octave. And 4th string, and octave. Ooh, looking good. 3rd string, and octave. And a little bit sharp, we'll have to take care of that. 2nd string, and octave. Okay, it's 4 cents sharp. And 1st string. Perfect. I thought that while I have this out, we compare apples to apples here. Let me bring you in. So that's what we got. This is the J-15 guitar, and we'll go back over to that J-45 vintage, install this, and see how close we are. Round 3 is our 6th string, 5th string, 4th string, 3rd string. second string, and the first string. Now we can get on with the compensated nut. Okay, we have our nut blank fitted. So now we'll just use the original nut to get the spacing right. Well, I got a basic idea, a basic pattern for the compensated values. The initial spacing has been done, and I've made that elliptical cut at the leading edge. Now we're going to sand it down a little further. Okay, this is where we're at right now with that compensated nut. I'm actually ready to map out the initial values, so we'll bring you into the tuner here. What we're doing now is we're playing the fretted 12th fret note and the open string. Okay, so that's a little flat. We'll make a note of that. Little tiny bit flat. Tune that fretted note before I check the open string. And open. So it's registering flat all the way across. Let's go take another look at this nut. So I am going to go all the way across this nut again, one string at a time. We've got lots of height here to play with, and that's why the profile of the compensated blank is made the dimensions it's made. What I'm doing here is I'm filing back the back half of that slot and just making sure that the highest point is this leading edge. Okay, I'm going to get another read on that. We still got quite a bit to play with here. It's better, definitely improved, but still registering just a hint flat. So I'm going to chase that, make sure that the leading edge is the highest point. Let's try that again. That's registering perfect now, and I will bring you around to the tuner. I just want to go through the rest of the strings. So we're going to do the A string next. Same deal, we're going to just basically, and you can see that that string was hung up on that back edge. So let's go, I got a 50 thou file actually for this. You want to be careful not to mess with the string spacing, because that's perfect. So very careful not to mess with that. Let's try that again. Okay, that's registering perfect now. D. Chase that D to the leading edge as well. And again, careful not to scratch the headstock. If you're new to this, you need to mask off the headstock with some bristle board. Go ahead and do that. I've done this a few thousand times, so I'm, definitely make it look easy. It's an acquired skill. The more you do it, the better you get. Okay, there's my gotta just work that a little tiny bit more. That's right on the money too. So G string. You can hear that kind of creaking as I turn it down. Now I got a 26 thou file. You don't want to mess with the actual string spacing. Now, I want to give you a better angle on this. This is why I like to bring this right up to nose level, because I actually sight down the file and point it at its destination, which is the third string post. Move that back. The neck is sort of upper chest level, and when I lean down, I can actually eye down that file, sight down the length of the file, and direct that string to the inside of its post. Let's try this one again. Okay, let's give that a try. Okay, that one's good. I'll bring you around a second. You can see for yourself, or hear for yourself. B string, the same thing. It was just a hint flat. So, I've got a 16th thou here, and I'm just gonna, again, I can sight down the file and direct it right to the inside of its post. Again, careful of the face of the headstock. Let's try that. That's registering 1 cent flat. So I am going to just work it a little bit more. We've got plenty of real estate in the crown of that nut to work it down. So that's what I'm doing. Again. Okay, 12th fret. That's very close. Okay, last string. First string, same thing. Just chase it to that leading edge. There we go. And again, I can put that right up to chest level, directing it to the post, inside of that post. Try that. Okay, let me bring you around to the tuner. So James had recently posted a question on my Patreon channel about this very thing, about the slot and whether there was sort of a hump in that slot. And I did answer him, but this is the best answer ever. So there's our fretted 12th fret on the 6th string, and open. There's our fretted 12th fret on the A string, open. And open. G string 12th fret and open. That's good. That's a little sharp, so we're going to move it back a bit. So the first three are great right where they are. The G needs to move back a little. Let's check the B. B string 12th fret and open. First string 12th fret and open. Okay, the only discrepancy we have is the G needs to be cut back just a little tiny bit. Let's go back to that G. So it's like 3.5 cents. There we go. Let's check that again. All right, take a look at this. We're not quite there yet. So our final move is to play the open string and fret the 12th fret note. Okay, obviously that's got to come way down. Let's do it. Okay, now we're talking open string and 1st fret. We are done. So this last bit of work is all cosmetic. Boy, you don't want to blow it at this point after spending that much time on it. Just the bottom tip, I can feel that a little bit. We are going to soften all this, and I will sand that down so that those slots aren't quite so deep. So the top part of the nut is good. This portion here can come back a little bit. Yeah, it's just the bottom. The top is good, just this portion right here. Okay, you want to go nice and easy at this point. It's so close to being done. It's an interesting experiment just comparing these guitars sort of back to back, literally. So there's the walnut back. I got to get a better look at it. It's sort of reflecting the light. Okay, there you go. How could you not like that? It's beautiful. Nothing wrong with walnut. Orville Gibson was fine with walnut. Most of those early instruments he made were made out of walnut. Of course, in the turn of the century, there were walnut trees in Michigan 8 feet in diameter, so he used what was available. It's funny how it's come full circle. Most of the manufacturers now are employing walnut in their building. I've got a bunch of walnut backs and sides, as well as rosewood, but you know, I've always felt that walnut was a great wood. Here is the J-45 Vintage, which is, of course, mahogany back and sides, mahogany neck, with a walnut stain on it. So let's flip them over and look at the front. And there's our banner headstock. This is J-45 compensated nut. Here's another view of it. And yet another view of it. And this is the compensated saddle on the J-45, and there is the compensated saddle on the J-15, and there is the compensated nut on the J-15. And here's another view of that compensated nut. Well, enough looking. Let's have a listen.